I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She's beloved book. Yes, she's a beloved book coach and, of course, empathetic editor. No other than Miss Sue Thoth.
Hello.
Welcome to Book 101, Miss Sue, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. I am Sue Toth, and as Daniel said, I am a book coach. I help authors if they're stuck anywhere in the writing process. I help them to get out of whatever ruts they might be in, or help them with plot points that they're stuck on, just anything to make your book writing go smoothly so you can get a great book out to the world.
Miss Sue Todd, thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. So, what is the main purpose of editing a book?
Well, editing a book, I think, is very, very important. You want to make sure that, first of all, that there are no typographical errors and, grammar and punctuation mistakes. But even beyond that, you really want to be sure before you release a book that it makes sense and that it flows well and that the details are all consistent. And these are all things that an editor can look at because they have a much more outward view. They're not as involved in the story as you are as the author, so they can see the things that you might skip over by mistake.
How does developmental editing differ from copy editing?
Okay, well, developmental editing is looking at the whole big picture of the story. We look at the plot. Does the plot make sense? Are there any plot holes? Are there, time connections that don't match up? Like, did we suddenly go from summer to winter with no fall in there? Things like that. We look at the characters. Do the characters make sense? Are they relatable? Do they behave the way that you're portraying them to behave throughout the story? We look at the big picture, and I say we because we do it together. Um, my job as a developmental editor is to be your ally in the writing process and to help you bring that book over the finish line. It's not to change your voice or to rip your book apart and tell you everything that's wrong with it. That is not at all what I do. I want to make the process easy and painless and help you get a great book out to the world.
To become bestseller.
Absolutely.
Ah.
Absolutely. That is
So,
my goal.
yes. So, what are the most common types of edits required for a manuscript?
Um, well, everyone should have their manuscript copy edited, and it should be copy edited by someone who is not, your boyfriend or your aunt or your high school English teacher. It should be someone who knows how to edit and can find the mistakes and the style issues that you might have missed. One of the most common things that I see, particularly in developmental editing, is time gaps. There's a lot of times when an author will be writing a story and, in one paragraph, oh, it was such a warm and beautiful morning. And then the next paragraph, oh, it's getting very cold out. I wish I had a jacket on. Well, most places don't go from that hot to that cold, within a few hours. Now, yes, there are instances where they do, but those are the sorts of things that I see. I also see things like a character's hair color or eye color will suddenly change for no apparent reason. They had blue eyes in the first chapter and they've turned brown by chapter 4. And unless they're a shapeshifter or a, vampire or something like some kind of creature that does that, that's not supposed to happen. So those are the kinds of things that I look really carefully at.
So, Miss Sue, how do editors maintain the author's voice while improving the text?
That's a great question. When I edit a piece, and this is my process, it's not every editor's, but when I do it, I read the entire book from start to finish first without making any notes, any changes, anything. What that does is allows me to get a good feel for the author's voice. I understand what kind of slang they might be using or jargon of a particular profession or language that was used during a particular time period, something like that. And then what I do is I'll go through it and I will make changes based on that. But if I think something isn't clear, I'll say, I see what you're trying to do here, but readers might have a problem with it. Would you consider changing this word to this word? I don't want to change your voice. I want your story to be your story. But I also want readers to be able to understand it and not put it down after chapter 2 because they just don't like it anymore. I can give you one example of something that happened with a client I was working with once. He was writing a book that was set in the 1920s, and it was the characters were very wealthy upper crust people, and two young males in their 20s were getting together. They were at a party and they hadn't seen each other in quite some time. So one said to the other one, "Hey, what's up?" And that obviously that language wasn't spoken in the 1920s, and it certainly wasn't spoken among very wealthy people. So that's the sort of thing I look for. And that's a kind of a glaring example, but you'd be surprised how much of that I see and I make suggestions to fix.
Yes, just like the word okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I
what
also
is go
No,
ahead.
I'm sorry, you go ahead.
So what is the importance of a style guide during the editing process?
A style guide is very important because it allows whatever certain little idiosyncrasies you as the author might have to stand. For example, if you're using a particular slang, it might be, underscored throughout Microsoft Word as being spelled wrong, or, you might get some sort of a message that says this word isn't right or something like that. I use a style guide to let anybody who reads the book after me know that this is not wrong. This is the way the author intended it to be. And that becomes important when you get to the proofreading stage, because oftentimes a proofreader will want to make all those little changes. And looking at the style guide, they will then know that they should not make those changes.
Very well said, Miss Two. Very well said.
Thank you. Oh my goodness.
Yes. So, how do you identify plot holes or inconsistency in a story?
Well, plot holes, as I said, like, I read the entire thing through from start to finish without making any changes or notations. That's always my first read. And that's when I will think about something. I'll say, hmm, I wonder what's going on here. It seems like something's missing. But I will wait and I'll finish reading the book to make sure it's not addressed later. If it is not, then in my second read, I will go back and I'll say, okay, there's a big hole here. You had this person doing this. And then, in the next paragraph, you had him taking a shower. And in the next paragraph, he's out dancing at a bar. Like there's something has to have happened in between there. Or, here it's summer and in the next scene, suddenly it's winter. Like what happened to the whole fall? And a lot of times it just takes a few sentences, a paragraph to fix those kind of plot holes. But authors are just so involved in telling the story that they forget those kinds of things. Same with inconsistencies. Um, I've had authors spell their main characters' names a few different ways in the past. And it's usually for the same reason. They're so caught up in telling the story that they just don't remember to look and to fix those things. So that's when I go in and I look at those inconsistencies, and I'll question an author. You have this character's name spelled this way and this way. Which do you prefer? And then once they tell me, then I will make the change globally so that it's spelled correctly throughout the whole manuscript.
So, Miss, what are the key
Mhm.
elements to focus on during structural editing?
What I focus on is the plot as a whole. Does the story make sense? Is the story something that readers are going to be really interested in and really want to sink their teeth into? Is the pacing good? One thing I find that authors do a lot is, they write and write and write and write, and then all of a sudden they get to the end. And oftentimes authors are given ideal word counts for the stories that they're writing. And so they'll be writing away, and then all of a sudden they'll realize, oh my gosh, I only have 3,000 words left and I have to end this thing. So they'll rush through some ending when they've written so much throughout the book that could probably be tightened up. So that's another thing that I look at is how is the pacing of the novel? Does it make sense? Does it keep a reader interested? Does it drag? Does it go too fast? Is the reader not going to know what's going on because the author skimmed over everything too fast? So those are the big things that I look at when I do a structural edit.
What strategies are used to improve character development?
Um, What I often have my authors do is I will have them write a biography of their main character. They don't have to write it out in paragraphs. They can do bullet points, but I want to know every single thing about their main character, whether it's going to be used in the story or not. I think it's important that the author really connect with their main character. So, what did they do for work? Where did they go to school? What were they afraid of when they were a little kid? What's their favorite ice cream flavor? What food can they not stand? Um, you got to really, really get to know who you're writing about. They have to be your best friend for the time that you're writing that story, or your worst enemy, depending on what kind of a character you're writing. So that's what I often encourage my authors to do that first before they even start the story.
Miss, what are the most common grammar or punctuation mistakes found in a manuscript?
Well, as far as punctuation, the big one that I find is uh, associated with dialogue. Like people will put periods instead of commas when a sentence is about to end, or they will put the punctuation mark outside of the quotation marks when it all belongs inside of the quotation marks. As far as grammar, biggest thing that I see is an overuse of adverbs. So instead of using an adverb, it's better to show your reader what's going on. So instead of saying, um, I'm mad, Tom said angrily, you would say something like, I'm mad, Tom said as he slammed his keys down on the kitchen counter. Something that shows he's mad, not just the author telling us he's mad.
So
So
how
those are
important how important is word choice and tone in the editing process?
It's very important. It's important to me as the editor to find it and make sure that I understand it, and if I don't, that probably means that the author was a little confused on what tone they wanted. So, then I'll have to ask them, are you going for really informal here? Are you looking to be formal? Are you looking to be angry? Is this person happy? What's going on with them? So for me as an editor, it's important for me to understand it. So therefore, as an author, it's important for the author to really be able to write how their character is feeling.
When is it appropriate to suggest removing or adding scenes or chapters?
Mm. Um, you know what? There's no definitive answer to that question. It really depends on the book. And what I do again, and that's my reason, and I've gone back to this a few times now, why I read from beginning to end first before I make any comments. Um, Sometimes, there'll be a character in there that eh, there's no real reason for them to be there. Or there'll be entire scenes that are, they might be fun, but they don't advance the story at all. So that's what I'm taking a hard look at. Is this scene advancing the story? Is is this character necessary to the story? And if not, I will suggest that it either be dropped or somehow enhanced to make it more viable as a part of the story.
So, Miso, what would be your advice for those people out there who want to be an editor or a book coach?
Uh, read, read vociferously, read religiously, read as much as you can. Um, Take classes. You know, there are people who think they can be an editor because they can find mistakes, grammatical errors or punctuation errors. And that's very important. And if you want to proofread, then that sort of thing is important. But there are lots of great classes out there for all different types of editing. There's fiction classes and nonfiction and academic and scientific. Any kind of editor you want to be, you can find certification programs, from just a couple of classes to entire college certification programs, depending on, your financial ability and how much time you want to take. But learn your trade. There's tons of craft books on everything, every kind part of editing. And the last thing I would suggest is join other groups of editors. The editing industry is the most supportive and least competitive industry that I have ever been a part of. People support one another. People will help you if you are really making an effort to find something out. They will help you. They won't say, "Oh, leave me alone because you might be taking my clients." Not at all. They're a very supportive industry.
What will be your short term and long term goals as a book coach or editor?
Um, my short-term goal is, as I mentioned earlier, to just kinda, you know, keep getting new clients. My long-term goal and some things the thing I've really been looking to do is to develop relationships with authors who write a lot of books or who write series. Um, where they'll keep coming back to me, with the second book in the series and the third book, or if they start a new series, they'll keep coming back to me because I know their work and because, we're at a point where we work really well together. So that's those are my goals for my business.
So, Misu, what is the best way to handle these agreements between authors and editors?
Well, as an editor, I do have a contract that I ask authors to sign. It's very, very author friendly. For example, there's an ironclad NDA in there where if I say anything about your book, you can sue me and you will win. We talk about timelines and deadlines and the amount of, phone calls and Zoom time that I'm willing to spend with people. And for me, that's quite a bit. I don't have any problem doing that. Um, Generally, most editors will ask for a portion of their fee up front. Many will take payment plans. I do. Um, with the final payment not being due until the piece is completely finished and ready to go back to the author. Um, most people do have an agreement like that, and I let my potential clients see my agreement. I let them ask questions. If there's something that they're really not happy with, I may change it. It depends on what it is. But that's how I usually do it, and that's how most editors do it.
So, Misu, how can authors prepare their manuscripts for the editing process?
Oh, I love this question. This is a very good question. Um, the first thing you're gonna wanna do is make sure that, first of all, it has to be complete. In book coaching, I work with authors as they're going through the manuscript. When I'm editing, I want a complete manuscript because it's very, very difficult for me to edit if an author is still making changes, because I might be editing something that could completely change. So, first of all, the book has to be complete. Secondly, I really want to see your best, cleanest effort. Does that mean there can't be any mistakes? No, of course not. However, I have read books where there were mistakes in every other line, and it becomes very difficult to concentrate on the story when you're constantly tripping over people's errors. So I ask that, you use Grammarly or one of those kind of programs to clean it up as best you can. And then when you've chosen an editor and you feel like you're happy with that person, let them do their work. You know, I have a time period of generally 4 to 6 weeks for a full length, 50 to 75,000 word book. If an author's coming back to me 3 days later saying, "So how's it coming? How you doing? What do you think?" I That you're not giving me time to do my work. So, it took you a long time to write it, you can't expect me to edit it overnight. So those are the most important things that I ask for from authors.
So, Misu, to wrap up our discussion for today, how do editors balance deadlines with the need for thorough editing?
I make sure, well, first of all, I have a calendar and I book people, for a certain amount of time. Like, I won't take on any more than a couple of new projects at a time. And most of my books, depending on how their length and the type of editing I'm doing, get anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks. When I tell an editor that I'm going to have a book, an author, I'm sorry, when I tell an author that I'm going to have a book back in 3 to 6 weeks, it's going to be back. Um, I give a specific date, like, if we start on January 1st and I say, 4 to 6 weeks, that's gonna be somewhere between January 31st and February 15th. Um, so I just, you have to trust that your editor is going to follow deadlines, and I know that not every situation works out perfectly. I am aware of editors that have not done what they've promised. Um And, sometimes you will have that issue and you'll have to pick somebody else, but that's what I make sure that I give myself the time to thoroughly read something, think about it, then go back for that second read and start making my notes.
Miss Sutha, thank you so much for sharing your talent to the world. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for
Thank you for having me.
helping. Yes, thank you for helping authors. So,
Of
can you
course.
please invite our listeners to be part of your book coach or editing?
Yes, you can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn under my name, Sue Toth, Toth. Um, I also have a website, www.sutoth.com. So I would welcome hearing from anybody who'd like to know more about it.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Sue Thought because if you support her, more empowering books to come. So, Miss Sue, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening.
Modicon people, see you soon. You are most welcome to come back, Misu, and let's talk